Melanie Gall is an internationally acclaimed vocalist. She has performed solo classical recitals across the globe, from Africa and South America to the Lincoln Center and Carnegie Hall in New York City. This beautiful songbird has written and internationally toured several award-winning solo shows featuring lost and forgotten historic music. When she isn't busy winning the hearts of full audiences, this talented entrepreneur and performer is working on her podcast, recording a new album, or writing a book, which, spoiler alert, she just got a New York agent. Like so many other performers and artists, Melanie lost her entire tour for 2020 and part of 2021 due to the pandemic. Come take this journey with us as Melanie shares some of the challenges she faced along her artistic journey and how that influenced her resilience and positivity in the present moment as she makes her way through the current messy middle. All right, Melanie Gall is in the house.
Hello.
Hello, how are you doing?
Fine, how are you?
Good. I want to sort of set the stage, and I know that there's a lot of people who actually know who you are and all the incredible things you've done. I want to talk a little bit about the shows that you've done and the training that you've done and how you became actually an internationally acclaimed vocal artist. You've done things at the Lincoln Center, Carnegie Hall in there as well, which is mind-blowing. So where did this all start? And give me a little bit of the journey.
Okay, sure. All right. Well, I grew up in St. Albert, Alberta, and I wanted to get out. So basically, I went, you grow up, I always sang. There were these Kiwanis music festivals, and I always won them. And my school was not a musical school at all. It was sports, and I'm not a sports person at all. Yeah, I'm so short. It didn't work. So I always got like participation badges, and it was really sad. But, singing was the thing I could do. So, I took singing lessons, and then I did an undergrad, and they didn't have the musical theater sort of program. Plus I can't dance, so that wouldn't have worked. But they didn't, like, now you can go to Grant MacEwan in musical theater in Edmonton. There's all these things, but really it was just classical. It was classical music. That's what you did. And so I did a degree there, and then I met a teacher who was actually touring. I guess this is a bit entrepreneurial. I ended up having a singing lesson with her, and then she ended up bringing me with her essentially to a school in the east of Canada. And I went to another school in Toronto, and then I ended up in New York and did my master's, and then did a postmaster's, and then went to Salzburg and did a sort of post-certificate thing at the Mozarteum in Salzburg. And basically I was on this opera track, and I love opera. I do, but I don't really sing it so much anymore. The economy crashed 2008, the year I graduated with my last degree. And so all the smaller opera companies closed. It went from a lot of opportunity for emerging artists to almost no opportunity for emerging artists. And I thought I would, and honestly, I don't want to slag off classical music, but I found that creativity and entrepreneurship was not rewarded. Basically, you have to have the languages, you have to read music, have the languages, be able to look at a score, know the historic context, know the different pronunciations based upon, what sort of Italian this was. Is someone who's high class and is low class. Like there's all these things you have to know to walk like you're in the 17th century. You have to know all these things. But in the end, you do whatever the conductor tells you to do, there's very little scope for personal creativity, I suppose. Got a little tired of sort of being treated like someone who didn't know what they were doing, had to know all these things to fulfill someone else's creative idea. Up in Vermont, I did this, the Pearl Fishers, a Bizet opera, and they put us all together in a cabin in the woods for three and a half weeks. That's where we were billeted essentially in this cabin together in the woods. And after spending that much time with classical singers, I was like, I think I'm good. I'm done. And that's the first year I had decided I would do a fringe show just for fun in Edmonton to see how it would go. And that was 2010 that year. And you know what? The contrast between like the opera singers they were so mean. They were just so mean. I mean, by the end, it was just like bullies in high school. And so I did the fringe, and it was like a family. And I thought, you know what? I love opera, but it's not worth being unhappy to sing. music I
Wow.
love. So, and then I found other great music.
It sounds to me like for a lot of different reasons, it felt actually a little bit more like a box to you and you were just kind of wanting to stretch out and fly and wings. So when you started to do that, did you feel like you were really starting to stretch out? Like, was that a hard transition for you to make, or did it feel really easy?
I mean, I spent, oh, how long was it? 13 years basically thinking that classical music was the only kind of music. I mean, I miss it. I love opera. It's hard to give that up. I mean, it's hard not to think, well, I failed. You have to be in top vocal form all the time. I went to the second most prestigious opera school in New York, and our teachers were telling us every day that like we had to walk into the school looking like you're ready and your hair is all beautiful and your makeup's perfect and you're wearing heels. And I was like, that's just not me. Like, I'll do it for
No.
performance. That's fine. But I don't want to blow out my hair every day. I think I should be judged off stage on, everyone's always saying, oh, you're too fat, you're too fat. And I'm like, I'm not that fat, man. And I was way thinner then. And it just gets to be like, really, that's the problem. Also, opera singers used to be fat. So like, really, really, this is a thing.
That's
And it
so
just got to be
crazy.
like, I want to eat that veggie burger and those donuts. Like I want to. And I don't want to think that I'm negatively impacting a singing career because I want those mini donuts.
It's one of the reasons why I'm not really involved in the film industry as much anymore. Why I went back to theater was because I felt like I was being judged a lot more on my acting, my skills, my craft, and a lot less on my looks. And it's just so unfortunate that that is the box that you get put in. That makes me really sad to hear. I'm not surprised.
It was an inherently unfair world, and I had a lot of advantages. I knew a lot of people in that world, but I was not the one they were promoting first. Yes, it's hard. It's hard to actually think I will never be the lead in Handel's Julius Caesar because that was my dream. That's a lot, and also it's a loss of like almost your identity because I was a classical singer. That's what I did. I know a lot about classical music that I haven't thought about for like a decade now almost because all my friends are in classical music. A lot of them have quit.
I'm so glad that didn't work for you and that you pushed out of it into something that feels better to you, because that the shows that you are doing, I think part of the reason why they're so successful, obviously you're incredibly talented, but talent alone doesn't sell a show. And to me, you're having impact on an audience. What was the initial thing? Is there a moment that sparked the music part? Is that part of your family? Is that what?
It is. Like my great grandfather was a cantor, and we're Jewish, so he was a cantor. He sang in synagogue, and my grandfather was a big band singer in Toronto, so he had a big band during the Second World War and after. And then my mom has always done music. She plays at our synagogue, and she's always sang. So there was always sort of like it sounds so terrible. Like one person in each generation who was the voice.
Yeah.
And I got it. So I mean, there was kind of no other choice. I mean, I was always going to do music. That was always, so I had to carry on the legacy essentially.
Yeah. So when you were transitioning, you did your first one-woman show. How did it go?
I mean, back then you show I sold out the run. So like they went, well, I got a cease and desist order because music that's out of copyright in the States is not necessarily out of copyright in Canada. So I learned my lesson when the Irving Berlin Foundation sent me a very angry letter, and I had to deal with that. Yeah. So I mean, but it was also like funny drama because like, and then you start talking to other artists and they're like, hey, I got a cease and desist order, and I'm like, I got one from the Kurt Weill Foundation.
It's like a badge of honor.
Like we've all gotten them.
So that kind of started the journey of one-woman shows for you, and you have just been killing it in that department, in the fringe realm, and I've seen it. I've seen you sell out your shows. I've seen the lineups of people. I've been a part of the audiences. For those people who don't know, the fringes are often your hard marketing on the grounds, and so you're constantly talking to people. It seemed like it was almost like an instantaneous great move for you. You moved into it and it just took off.
I mean, I guess what I did at the Fringe, and a lot of people have done this in their different ways, but I found a niche. So, I mean, My niche is lost historic music. When people come to my show, they essentially know what they're getting. And I love doing them. And I love finding old music that no one knows anymore and bringing it back to life, because I mean, you can just think of these people who wrote a song often it just took them a day. This was just a throwaway song they wrote, then they died eventually. And this is all that's left of their legacy is this song, and is bringing it back to life and making it part of other people's lives. I make it very clear what people are going to see, because they know I've been there. I guess this would have been the 10th, 11th year. That's a lot of years.
We met officially on the Fringe circuit. You were touring a show called Ingenue. I don't know if that's how it's pronounced. Is that how it's pronounced?
So I pronounced it, and I am fluent in French, and I was wrong.
Oh.
I realized today I was like, just a minute. So it's Ingenue.
Okay.
I'm gonna have to get back my French diploma.
I think it's sorry Ingenue. For all the francophones out there. But you were touring this show, and I got a chance to see it. And it's such a beautiful show. This show is about Deanna Durbin and Deanna Durbin's rivalry with Judy Garland. And it's such an interesting story. I had no idea Deanna Durbin existed. So for those of people who don't know you and don't know your show, do you want to give a little bit of a background? Because this show, in a unique way, has taken off in a whole different direction, which I want to talk about. So
there were a lot of Hollywood stars in the 1930s, and actually 1920s too with Mary Pickford, but from the, let's say 1930s to 1940s, they came out of Canada, and it was very easy to immigrate down to the States back then from Canada. Deanna Durbin is one of them. She is unique because she and Judy Garland were hired about the same time. They sang in very different ways, but they were treated very differently. Their lives run on a parallel in basically until Judy Garland died. Their lives ran on a parallel in that Judy Garland, I mean, she has a legacy. She's amazing, but her life was more or less unhappy. Whereas Deanna Durbin, she found her happiness. She was always treated like a little princess in Hollywood. She was never given the drugs that Judy Garland was. Her money wasn't taken by her parents. I mean, she had a really good life in Hollywood, and when few people did. But also she changed Hollywood. She changed how movies were made. Before she came onto the scene, adolescent age actors, so like basically anyone over 12 to 18 were unemployable. So as soon as you were a child anymore, you were out. She became such an overnight star in a way that people just didn't see in Depression era Hollywood.
The plan was in 2021 to go and do that show, but you're moving into a whole new realm with this show that's more than just you doing a show. And what's that look like?
Okay. I wrote a book about, there has never been a biography about Deanna Durbin, an official biography, but she didn't want, when she left Hollywood, she didn't want a book written about her. She wanted to be forgotten because she wanted to live her life away from the cameras, away from attention. So she died only a few years ago, and most anyone who would have written a biography about her at that point died. She died in 2013, and at the age of 92. I wrote a biography. I had done all the research, got an agent. She's pitching it to a bunch of publishing houses next week, actually. So
okay, so now I want to fast forward a little bit to the new show that you were going to be performing alongside Ingenue in 2021.
So the new show is Lost Songs of American Prohibition. The show, it's a bunch of lost songs. So a lot of them are about bootlegging alcohol through Canada, because as you do. As you do. The songs are great. They're just amazing, cute little songs that nobody knows. And I got this old-timey ragtime pianist to play the backtrack.
What I love about your shows is that this is where your incredible creativity comes in, is you actually create a story out of it. And your story has a character that brings you through the story. And so it's like this beautiful through line that we're really genuinely interested in, and then the music comes out of that, it's born out of that. But as the character, you really bring us through part of the story, and you get us to see through their eyes, through their perspective. For you, what's the inside process look like from the idea of a show to actually putting it up on stage?
I think of an idea, I Google it to see if anyone's done it. So yeah. I mean, because often you'll be like, this is a great idea, but someone else has done it quite a lot. First I see, is there anyone else doing it who might be performing where I am? And then I look at the music. I pick the songs. Basically, I pick the songs, decide what songs I want, and then build a story around it. It takes a couple weeks to write, and then I leave it for a few months, and then I go and write it properly. So first draft takes a couple weeks to do. Basically, it's just filling in between the songs, if it's action or dialogue or whatever it is, and then go back and rewrite it a little bit later. And then honestly, like when I'm memorizing it, it changes again. It's really just about picking music I want to do and building a story around it. It's mostly about the music. So it's picking music and then finding compelling things. Honestly, you've kind of just figure out what works during the first week of performing it. It gets rewritten on the spot. Usually I just make a bunch of things up and see if they work or not within the confines of the script.
Do you have certain things that actually kind of draw something out of you or inspire you in that way when you're doing a new show?
I guess I think it's really sad that people who have been so relevant in musical history are forgotten. It's a short memory recently for history. I mean, people have a very short memory. There's so many people who wrote some amazing songs or who were band leaders in the 1940s, and people don't know them. So I just want to save history, because like for these knitting songs, a lot of them were commercially published, but they're not in a library anywhere. They're not in an archive. They're in people's piano benches. Luckily, the knitting community is pretty well connected. So I was able to put a call out through the podcast. And a lot of knitters just mailed me sheet music that they had or their mother had or that they had found at a thrift store or whatever. But yeah, this music was honestly about to be lost, a lot of the songs. For example, one of the knitting songs, Canadian International Song Copyright, was put into place because of the popularity of this Canadian World War I knitting song. So they are historically relevant. People don't know it. So I guess for me, it's saving a bit of history that could otherwise honestly be lost. During the First World War, the women's experience on the home front, especially in Canada, has not really been first person recorded. I mean, there's one book written by Ella Montgomery, like who wrote Anne of Green Gables. She wrote one book that pretty much that is the only book that tells the story of what life was like in Canada during World War I for women at home, and these knitting songs. So because a lot of them were written by women. So I mean, again, it's telling us history from a perspective that's just as relevant, but was lost.
I love that that's the heart of what you're doing. Almost like each person that you feel drawn to show the world and put a spotlight on is your muse for that particular show.
With the Prohibition show especially, though, there's so much information about Prohibition. And so many of the shows vaguely reference things that I had never heard of. So it was learning about like doctors who would prescribe alcohol, and that was how you got it. And then when Winston Churchill came for a visit, I forget what he was before he was prime minister, but he was some diplomat, and he came for a visit to the States under Prohibition, and he was a big drinker. And so, he had people writing him prescriptions so he get his alcohol. Stories like that, about how easy it was to become a rabbi, basically a Jewish priest, because rabbis could get alcohol. So for the first time in history, people were like, we want to be Jewish too. Like gay prohibition, like finally someone wants to be us. But, just all these stories about how people would sneak alcohol into the States from various points in Canada. And just like, I learned so much. So really for that show, it was just cutting it down, because I could just talk for 7 hours about the weird things about prohibition.
But that's part of the fun of the process, hey, is that you get to uncover facts that you didn't even know. I just wanted to talk about your CDs and your music, because you are languaged in knitting and spinning, and your CDs have come out of knitting. Your podcast, which I want to talk about too, some shows have come out of that. What's up with the knitting?
My sister and I, well, actually, no, it started with her. It was 2009, I think. She was living, she works with the Canadian government, and she had been posted to Argentina, which has this giant wool district market. Plus it's a short ride away from Uruguay, where they have two giant international luxury yarn producers that allow visitors, or at least they used to come in and buy everything at cost. So, I mean, she went a little yarn crazy. She went yarn crazy at the time. And so she suggested that we should do a podcast. And I had never heard of what a podcast was, because I was singing opera. I don't know who had time to learn about things. So I figured we could do one podcast. We've been doing it since 2009. We started doing this podcast. We started getting really involved in the knitting community. And then I found these knitting songs, and I didn't write them. They're historic lost songs about knitting from World War I and World War II. So I applied for a Canadian music production grant. So I researched and did the music, and those have been the best-selling things I've ever produced. Because
this pandemic has hit everyone so very hard, especially performing artists. It's been catastrophic. Many, many people have lost their number one source of income. You think, okay, well, we thought it was going to be okay in 2021, but now we're not so sure. One of the conversations that we've briefly touched on you know, just outside of this interview, is just not being the artists who stop doing art, you know, because of this whole COVID thing. And I love that you bring that up, because I don't want to be that person. I mean, what do you think is a way that we can have our perspectives keep us through the middle of this whole thing and get to the other side of it? Because it's going to change us whether we like it or not. It already has, you know? So do you have any thoughts or advice around that?
I mean, for me, I have been working on actually the show after the Prohibition show. I've been working on, that was supposed to be 2022, but you know, So, I mean, I've been researching and getting the next show and possibly the show after that. I mean, I've been researching sort of the next, and I don't know if I'll end up doing them, but I've been picking the music. I've been doing as if that's the next show, just because, it'll never hurt to know this music. It'll never hurt to have this. And for me, I've also been picking, I mean, I love recording CDs. I love doing music recording. There's a sort of self-indulgent CD that I would love to make of just songs I love. I've done one, I want to do another, but it's expensive. So, since I am a poor artist and have no money for that, but I'm still picking the songs and, you know, picking the arrangements and deciding what instruments I would like in each one. So I'm getting things ready. So if things get to go ahead, I'm ready.
Yeah.
But also I have a core group of artists, a few artists that I connect with every day or every couple days, and we're all doing our own thing. But we're basically like, so, you know, you're slinging pumpkins for a month to make your rent. Okay, but what performance thing are you doing next? You know, and trying to come up with ideas for each other and looking for opportunities for each other. But you never know if you find an opportunity that's not right for you, but might be okay for another artist. And there's always strength in numbers. It also, you know, it reminds people like this. You're reminding me that I'm relevant. I've forgotten half the things you've mentioned because the world has gotten really small.
I know.
My world is helping my sister with her kids and helping my mom with stuff. And hanging with my mom and hanging with my bird. Like that's mostly like, that's what I do now.
I love that you use the word relevant. It's part of the reason I want to do this project is remind people of the relevance. And it's not just artists, it's really everybody. But I do think artists are just taking such a hard hit because so many of us identify very much with our craft. But you are relevant. You inspire me to keep going with my art and my craft.
I think people need to not lose focus that at some point we will be performing again. And
yes,
like, write your show now.
Time's never going to come back, ever. So we have this incredible gift of time. That's huge. You've actually got a bit of a history of working for non-for-profit organizations with kids in particular and orphanages. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, there's been some, basically, well, this was actually, the Canadian government sent me to various orphanages now and then. I did one in Algeria, one in Morocco. Basically, it was a funded, I was in these countries singing concerts anyway, sponsored by the Canadian government, and they do outreach. So this was sort of an outreach thing from the government. So I have done, there's no like official anything. It was more just like they set up a concert. Like in Sudan, I did a concert at a women's university, and I did a masterclass there with their jazz program. And I mean, it was just amazing that there's this jazz, this vibrant, so many talented people in a jazz program in the foremost women's university in Northern Africa is in Khartoum. And people don't think of Sudan and think of like higher education in that way. But like, it was amazing to work with these people and talk to these people who will likely never like be in New York playing jazz just because of, you know, international borders and what's going on. But it was just, and the orphanages, I performed at probably 3 or 4, and, you know, it's just, the kids are lovely. It was just, you know, you feel, I don't know that giving them a puppet show for children help their lives in the long run, but it was just really nice to be able to sort of go out and do something.
Absolutely. Well,
yeah, I'd forgotten about that actually. That was really fun to do. We all help each other. We've all had so many people, I'm sure, help us in our career. So many people. And that's why I think we should help each other. I mean, again, it makes us stronger.
You're awesome, Melanie. I mean, I just adore you. I love the journey that you're on, and I love your heart in the whole thing. You're somebody who inspires me personally and professionally. I know we're going to get on the other side of this thing, and I know our shows are going to get back out there. Who knows when or how, but they will. So thank you.
Well, thank you too. Thank you again for making me feel relevant, because our worlds have small.
It's a mess.
And I really appreciate that.
The world is a real mess right now. And you're right. The world is, it feels like it's gotten really small, but I think that's a perspective too. I don't think it has. I just think it really feels that way. And you absolutely are relevant, you know? And so, yeah, man, just big encouragements to you. Thank you so much for being such a light and a leader in the middle of all of it.